Hello and welcome to the On the Couch podcast, the podcast that gives you the view from the therapist chair. I'm your host, John Dennis, a licensed professional counselor. You're listening to OTC episode 59 with Kara Bolling, author of The Therapist's Guide to Being Pregnant. Hello again, OTC listeners. Thanks for stopping by. Today I'm bringing a conversation that I had with Kara Bolling, who is an LCSW in the Baltimore, Maryland area, and she's the author of The Therapist's Guide to Being Pregnant, and she does individual therapy, supervision for licensure, but also works with a lot of therapists kind of getting ready for being out on maternity or paternity leave. And I wanted to talk with her because there are so many times where, as a therapist, I've had clients that experienced their therapist being out, either because of a medical issue, pregnancy, whether that's them retiring or moving. And oftentimes it's difficult for clients to navigate that. You know, maybe they have to take a break and, not receive therapy during that therapist being away or being out. Some of them, they stop and they never go back. So I wanted to talk with her about the client end of things and how clients can prepare, questions they can ask, things that they should be aware of, and equip people for how do you deal with your therapist not being available for a period of time. And I don't know. Again, it just it's something that I've run into quite a bit as clients have gotten referred to me or our practice. And so I wanted to try to put something together as a resource and some ideas for, how do you make it through that? Because that can be a really difficult situation. A lot of people that are seeking therapy have already experienced loss in their life, and they really come to trust and connect with their therapist or their social worker. And when that person is going to be out, it creates another break, essentially. And sometimes that can re-trigger clients. They can, things were going well. They were getting into a really stable place with therapy, and they'd worked on some things, and they're feeling pretty good about stuff. And, not through any fault of the therapist. They have a life as well. And it just sometimes it can kind of throw things into a little bit of upheaval, and clients often experience a lot of stress and anxiety as they themselves prepare for their therapist to be out. So like I said, I wanted to try to put something together to help people. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Take care. All right. OTC listeners, I have here on the show Kara Bolling, who is a somatic psychotherapist and an LCSWC. So, Kara, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah. Thank you for being on. Good morning.
We do.
It's. I mean, we were chatting a little bit just about life with kids and quarantine life. How are you doing at this point?
We're hanging in there. There are a lot of pros to quarantine life, especially with toddlers. Like, I'm catching way more things that my 1.5-year-old is saying before the babysitter does.
Yes.
So that's cool.
All those special moments, and then some.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Feelings are real. Feelings.
Oh yes. I think we're kind of going through some of the same stuff. It's been interesting to have it on the personal and the professional side. Like working with clients and switching over to telehealth. definitely seen a lot of stuff with parents that I work with, where I'm working with the kid, and the parents are like, "Oh my gosh, what is going
Yeah.
on?" So, give me your story. How did you get into counseling? What path did you take?
Sure. Um, well, I went to social work school in the early-ish 2000s.
Hmm.
And I knew I wanted to be a therapist eventually, but I also knew I wanted to have other experiences in the field first. So I ended up working in foster care and then community residential treatment at first for the first few years after I got my MSW.
Oh, all right,
Um,
in the trenches.
oh yeah. And I'm so glad I did. I learned a lot about myself and the world, um, and then at some point I was like, okay, well, this is great and everything. I do love my job. And also, I want to be a therapist, and I'm feeling more confident in that. So I started a private practice on the side. Um, and then I got a job at an outpatient mental health agency. And I kept my private practice on the side going. I worked there for about 5 years, and then after I had my first child, I decided I was ready to make the leap into full-time private practice. Because when you change one thing, like you have a kid, just change everything.
Yeah,
That's my motto.
yeah. You
Yes,
don't say. You may as well do it quick like a band-aid.
just rip everything.
Yeah. And,
So I've been in business for myself for about 3 years now.
awesome. And is there a specific focus or niche that you work with?
Yeah, I my niche is actually somatic psychotherapy, and it can help uh, anyone with anything really. But trauma, relationship issues, anxiety, and depression. But I say that somatic psychotherapy is my niche because I really work best with people who want to work from a somatic perspective. So maybe they, are into mindfulness and holistic treatments, and they know they want, to work in this way, or maybe they've tried other talk therapies that just haven't helped. Or haven't gotten them somewhere that they want to go, and so they know they're looking for something a little more earthy, crunchy.
Okay. And yeah, I was going to ask you, can you kind of unpack that somatic a little bit for listeners that may not be familiar with it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, talk therapy, you're sitting with your therapist and you're talking about your day, and you guys are maybe problem solving, or maybe there's some cognitive behavior therapy where you're looking at your thoughts and your feelings, and is so helpful for so many people. And somatic therapy is like, um, just has like a different orientation, whereas generally talk therapy is like thoughts and feelings. Somatic therapy uses the body as the primary focus of the work.
Hmm.
So we might start a session with, how was your week? What do you want to focus on? What happened with your spouse or at work? Um, and then as we're talking about the story of what happened, we want to drop down into mindfulness and into the body to notice what are the sensations that are happening in your body, or the urges to move that are happening in your body that might be going on that you weren't even aware of, because
Hmm.
there's be a lot more material to unpack there.
Sure.
So it's especially helpful with people who've experienced trauma.
Hmm. So
And
I imagine you're at least familiar, if maybe not a proponent of Bessel van der Kolk and the body
yeah,
keeps the score.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm training in a model called sensory motor psychotherapy, and Pat Ogden is the creator. So she is, like at Bessel van der Kolk is on the advisory board of sensory motor, and there's a lot of wisdom sharing that goes back and forth between all of those folks.
Awesome. Yeah, I just made a note of that. I wasn't familiar with sensory motor and Pat Ogden, so I'll definitely check into her. Um, and yeah, you were saying obviously it works best for people that want to focus on that and are comfortable with that. So often I find especially the younger set, the kids and teens that I may work with, that, even as adults though, we're so unaware of that mindfulness and drawing the focus to the body. And oh well, what does sadness actually feel like? How do you describe it, and how do you experience anxiety, or those different things? So many people are not familiar with that and not practiced at doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it's it's like skill building for the real world,
Yeah.
space style.
And definitely with trauma, you see that disassociation where it's almost predisposed to not connect that way. Like
Yeah.
it's like this.
Strategy sometimes not to connect to your body.
Yeah, but it's almost this like both at the same time of like, for a lot of people with trauma come panic attacks, and there you're becoming super heightened and attuned to what your body is telling you, and at the same time not in wanting to get away from that, and wanting to, maybe not wanting to disassociate, but it's sort of like a natural part of it.
Yeah. And disassociation is a pretty effective survival strategy,
Yeah.
but you just don't want to go around in your day-to-day life having to do that all the time. So,
Sure. And
yeah.
I think that's such an important point that you bring up, of the effective survival skill. That idea that it's very uncomfortable. It's not working for a lot of people, but at the same time, it is. It's how you survived that trauma and how you got there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, a part of your practice focuses on a different niche, on helping clinicians prepare for being out on maternity leave. Can you speak a little bit to how'd you come to focus on that?
Sure. Well, selfish reasons, probably.
Mm-hmm.
When I was pregnant with my first, I was working at the agency, and so I had a little more support around me, even though people didn't know right away that I was pregnant. Once I did start telling, my supervisors and my colleagues, there was more of like a built-in support system in a way. But when I was pregnant with my second, I was fully in my own private practice. And so, number one, I forgot a lot of the things that I had done the first time around. And two, there wasn't the same the like community that I had of referral sources, and people that I networked with. I don't know, I just felt kind of weird about talking with them. I was worried about how they would view my pregnancy as maybe something that would get in the way of the work, or my ability, that knowing that I would be taking a leave soon.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was thinking through all that, I went online to try to find like a book. I wanted a book.
Uh-huh. A
Or
manual, yeah, some steps.
there's a book for every kind of therapy modality that you could ever possibly want to focus on. So I was like, can I have a book about this? But I couldn't find anything really. So I started really thinking about it very intentionally. And I think a, another big like motivating factor was that for focusing on this in a really intentional way, was that I knew that I wanted three things. One, I knew I wanted to take a solid maternity leave that would get my baby through his fourth trimester. Two, I knew I wanted to keep my business going for sure. And number three, I knew I wanted to make sure I was taking good care of my clients. So yeah, that it all came out of that, and I ended up coming away with it, with all that thinking, with a book in hand. So, um, yeah.
So you wrote the book.
I did write that book.
Nice.
Yeah, I did.
And now, yeah, I guess kind of looking at your experience, did you have varied reactions from your clients to the pregnancy, and you telling them that and preparing them for that?
Yeah, I did. I think every client that you see obviously has their own history and constellation of, um, uh, relational issues that they bring to the table. And so everybody had kind of their own different um, reaction
Hmm.
to learning about my pregnancy. Um, so yeah, I mean, as I decided how I was going to share the news and how I was going to hold space for this to be, it's not like it's a part of their work. It's this thing that I'm bringing into the room that's going to impact their work, because how could it not?
Hmm.
I really did think very intentionally about each of my clients and how they might need to hear me, and how they might need me to hold space for them in certain ways.
Hmm. Sure. And what are some of the steps that you have clinicians go through when preparing clients for this?
Yeah. Um, yeah. So uh, I would say it's really important, first and foremost, to take good care of yourself. And I mean, I'm talking about like really to give yourself permission to take good care of yourself, because I think
Mm.
social workers and counselors and therapists, we are all really good at talking a good game about self,
You don't
but
say.
really take our own advice, do
Yeah.
yourself first all the time. I don't know. That might be hard for some of us. So, um, when you're dealing with a pregnancy, there are a lot of different things that your body is going to need. So, giving yourself permission to think about, um, and to really take good care of yourself. Um, also, planning your income and savings for taking a parental leave, like right from
Mm.
the beginning.
Sure.
Being intentional about telling your clients, like I was saying before, how you break the news and when you break the news, and what you say to your clients is all really important, and sometimes needs to be, different for each client.
Mm.
Prepare for the unexpected, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Because, like we all get a due date when we're pregnant, but that never really usually
Yes.
does.
The baby usually has a different idea.
Babies have their own ideas, don't they?
Yes.
And finally, I think it's important for therapists to collaborate with their clients on rituals for saying goodbye for now.
Mm.
Instead of just saying, okay, in a very business-like way, I'm going to be out, you're going to be working with so and so, and then I know I will see you after this is over. I think it's really magical almost, and really powerful when you kind of use going away on parental leave as a way to say goodbye to the work you have been doing, because then you get to like praise your client for the things ways you've noticed them growing and changing, and then when you come back from leave and you start working with these people again, you can start fresh.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that as you were saying, a lot of times, we're trained to have that, discharge session where you summarize and wrap up and yeah, make observances or connect them with other services. So it's sort of this interesting, like, I wouldn't say halfway point, but yeah, like a step in that direction of getting to do that and then hopefully coming back to it. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, with going back to some of the things that you said, I think are so important. Do you, how do you determine what you say to which clients, and when you tell clients? Do you talk with counselors and social workers about, okay, once you start telling clients, like you need to tell all of them, or yeah, how do you typically
Yeah.
prepare people for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, um, number one, I think you have to be really sure that you are ready to tell your clients
Mm.
that you're pregnant. And there's a lot of things to think about.
Sure.
I know in the first trimester, when you're not feeling yourself, and a lot of people experience morning sickness and nausea and stuff like that. And I really, there was a part of me that really wanted to say, like, this is not me, or this is not you. I'm different. I know it. And it's because I'm pregnant. So,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, there are various reasons that you might want to wait, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only because in the first trimester there is still risk of pregnancy loss, but also as soon as you talk to your clients and tell them that you're pregnant, then you will be a pregnant person in the room for the duration of the time you'll spend with them before your leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you will need to hold that as part of what's in the room between the two of you for that entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So be really ready to talk about it and to make room for your clients to have their own individual reactions.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely made me think of, obviously, if you're working with a client that is struggling with fertility themselves and having to bring that up, it's so often where, well, I would say it's shifted some or shifted a lot, but obviously, way back, history of psychology, that idea of like, your stuff isn't supposed to be brought into the room. The therapist is supposed to be the blank slate.
Right.
But obviously it's needed in these types of situations. Anything that you usually go over with clients that are specifically dealing with fertility issues?
Yeah. I mean, for clients that have, their own history of fertility challenges and even like miscarriage, pregnancy loss, stillbirth, anything like that, it's so normal for the grief and the pain of their own experiences to come up in the room, and it's unavoidable. So, with those clients, really highlighting, excuse me, the fact that this news that I'm sharing with them is going to bring up their own stuff, and that when it happens, when they're feeling, not only their own grief and loss and the pain of loss, but maybe even angry with me, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take it personally.
And that switching to the other side of the couch, to the client side, yeah. Would you tell clients, yeah, that is a part of this, and you have a right to bring that up, and please share that. Please talk about that. That's going to strengthen the therapeutic relationship and help you through this process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are a host of different things that can come up for clients, and I welcome all of it, because yes, I am the one that's bringing this into the room. It might not have been the thing that you came in knowing you wanted to work on, but it's a thing that's happening in the process of our work together, and so let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And especially working with trauma the way you have, did you experience any anger and resentment of, well, you're abandoning me, when I need you most? A lot of times, especially with borderline clients that are dealing with that you kind of get that. Did you experience that?
Oh yeah, people who have had, I mean, I feel a little uncomfortable talking about specific clients.
Sure.
But generally, people who've experienced abandonment in their lives, and even, people who've experienced a lot of therapist turnover for whatever reason,
Yeah.
not only are they, and I do a lot of like, you might be feeling this,
Okay.
or you might be feeling this about it, and like whatever it is, it's cool. But fear, that I'm going to leave, I'm going to go out on leave, and I am going to never return to my work, right? Is one possible, but also anger. Anger at the therapist, that the therapist would put you in this position to be preparing for loss again, knowing that you've had a lot of loss in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it made me think of clients that I've worked with in the past that, I think it's reality that, the eventual events that occur of like, a therapist retiring or a therapist moving or passing away or, having a terminal illness or something like that, in addition to, potential for pregnancy and parental leave. So I could see where, they've had these things happen in the past and really struggled with, well, great, now I have to find a new therapist or I have to pause the work that I'm doing. And how do you prepare a client for the actual leave of like, okay, what are we going to do during the time that I'm away? How do you prepare them for that? You're listening to OTC episode 59 with Kara Bolling, author of The Therapist's Guide to Being Pregnant. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor.
Would you like to talk to a counselor but can't find the time? Would you rather talk to someone from the comfort of your own home? If so, Parenting and Family Solutions is here to help. We now offer teletherapy to all clients who reside in the state of Pennsylvania. Using our secure portal, you can have a video session with your counselor using a laptop, desktop computer, or smartphone. Visit our website to learn more at www.parentfamilysolutions.com or give us a call at 717-602-5560 to see if teletherapy might be a good fit for you. Let us help you build a stronger family and a healthier you.
And how do you prepare a client for the actual leave of like, okay, what are we going to do during the time that I'm away? How do you prepare them for that?
Yeah. Well, there's discharge planning or transition planning that you can do or that you will do as a therapist for your clients. And that, again, like depends on you as a client, what you're bringing to the work, and how stable you are, if there are any safety issues that are showing up for you. If we're working on something that is sort of an ongoing stressor or an ongoing symptom, or if, or, and so there are varying responses or like plans that you can make with your therapist about what your break from your work with them might look like. You could transition to another therapist and meet with them weekly until your therapist returns to their practice, or you could be connected with another therapist and then with that therapist decide, hey, I'd like to meet, every couple of weeks or once a month, or even like, I just like to know that you're here in case I need to check in with someone about something. That's probably the range of responses. Yeah.
Do you find, I imagine you find, varying degrees, similar to when a client or when a counselor or social worker is out on vacation, they typically have to provide coverage, at least, a colleague or somebody that is there on emergency basis. And most of the time I found that people are like, yeah, I'll just wait till you get back. Obviously with vacation, it's typically unfortunately, much shorter than a paternity leave. Do you find, some clients fall into the like, oh, okay, I'm good, I'll just discharge and be done. And then some fall into the, Okay, yes. Why don't, I'll wait till you get back, but, I'll connect with this other therapist. Do you find many people do actually reach out to that other therapist and connect to them, or it's more just a fail-safe to have?
Yeah, I mean, I had a whole spectrum of different responses. I think that, I definitely had clients that actually did reach out to the therapist that that was my, sort of backup, and worked with that person. And, one of those people even decided that they wanted to continue working with that other therapist.
Sure.
And I think that's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can curse on this podcast, so I'll bite my.
Go ahead if you like.
I think that's really wonderful. And I actually, that was one of the things that I would say to my clients to prepare them. In one of my spiels was like, you know what? And you might find that you want to continue working with the person that is my backup, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some people that were, just like and talking about discharge or even transition planning, they really figured out that they were done with our work.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had on the other side of it, people who I knew needed to be connected. And sometimes, and it happened to me that there was not the follow through to the connection that it was my assessment needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be those things where you make a recommendation based on your clinical assessment and somebody's not going to follow through. You are not the boss of this, right? You're like a guide, and make sure you document.
Yes.
Document.
As always, yes. Well, and on the client side of things, I mean, I would imagine you're talking with them. Like you said, you're trying to summarize the work you've done up to that point, and trying to leave them with some skills at all times, but especially in this, to continue with during that time. So if those are mindfulness practices you've taught them, or resources that you've given them, exercises, kind of reminding them about that and having them continue those during the leave.
Yes, absolutely, John. Yeah. Just like you would, if you were saying goodbye for forever, you could say, what's your plan? Like, what are you going to be? What's your intention? Like in a good yoga class, what's your intention for the practice? What's your intention for the next several months? How are you going to support the really good work that you've done here?
Mm-hmm. And with the clients, are there other issues that you've seen clients struggle with during this time that maybe we haven't touched on? Are there any trends that you've noticed, or observations?
I think one curious thing is, we talked a little bit about, clients who have their own history of pregnancy loss or infertility. And we talked a little bit about clients who have a history of loss or feelings of abandonment. Another curious thing that I experienced from my clients was, there's a couple. One of them is people who were already parents, having their own like walk down memory lane come up as a result of my pregnancy, and wanting to be helpful to me and almost shifting the dynamic, like to almost like feel motherly toward me.
Yeah.
To give their advice about.
Suddenly you're on the other side of the couch from them.
And I totally love the instinct there. I now that I'm on the other side of having babies, I find myself doing it too, and have to sometimes bite my tongue. Like, this is not the time nor place to advise someone on,
Uh-huh.
let them have their own journey. But I love the instinct there. But as the therapist, it's my responsibility to keep on making sure that we're bringing you back to your own issues and your own stuff, and making sure we're not distracting ourselves too much by talking about, my pregnancy journey. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I could see where that's again a hard balance, that gray area, like we were saying before with the tabula rasa, and okay, I need to bring up that I'm pregnant, we need to plan for this, but then not make it the focus of their session and like hijack it or allow them to not focus on their own stuff. Kind of being able to bring it back to the client of like, okay, we're here for you and your stuff.
And then the other thing I'm thinking about is, I don't know, no one ever said this to me, but it's just, I think, a gut instinct that I have, that I think some clients struggle with I don't know if desire is the right word, or with the feeling like they need to be polite. So, and what I mean by that is, like, to not say certain things. When we encounter a pregnant person in the world, there is oftentimes, not for everyone maybe, but there is oftentimes like a feeling of wanting to like protect that person, or make sure that person is okay. And so I think that's something to notice if you're the client, because the desire to not offend your therapist might get in the way with your own process and the things that this event that's happening in your therapist's life might bring up for you, which are incredibly valid.
Yeah. I was starting to think of just so many layers of, in talking with Lori Gottlieb, she talked about, I think we all, when we go to therapy, you want your therapist to like you, and pregnancy or not, if I offend them, what's going to happen? Are they not going to like me anymore? Am I not going to get the best care? I started like thinking of all these different scenarios of like, as the therapist, you have to address, like, hey, please don't eat in the session. I will get sick because I'm dealing with the all the sensory overload, or like if a client wears a particular perfume or hand lotion that it's just becomes too much. All those different nuances I could see.
Mm-hmm. So, if your therapist needs to take care of themselves, that's something I think to mention here too, John, that there are ways, if we haven't said this already, but there are ways that your therapist is probably going to show up differently for the work while they're pregnant.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe they're more tired than usual. Or maybe they call out sick more often, when usually that's like a really rare thing that never happens. And definitely at some point you are going to notice that one of the ways they're going to show up differently is they're going to have a huge belly. There's going to be a huge belly between you and your therapist. So I think it's important for clients to know that their reaction to any of that matters. Their disappointment in their therapist, maybe, or fear that comes up, or frustration, or sadness, or even apathy. Your therapist needs to hear about all that stuff, and should want to hear about all that stuff, should welcome all of that into the room, because they have a responsibility to not take any of that personal. And to help you explore the roots of the feelings and the needs that those feelings are trying to help you get met.
Yeah, I could see just so many things where, like you said, the obvious, the physical change, the emotional change, the mental focus, memory. Just like you said, they're more tired. Their battery might be a little more run down, and just so varied. You know, based on the person and the therapist and the way their body is reacting to the pregnancy, and like you were saying with some of the clients that may already be parents, having their own experience and that kind of coloring their reaction to their therapist's pregnancy, and gosh, it's just so many layers to it. Are there any specific things that you would go over to help a client if their therapist all of a sudden is out on emergency leave? Something happens with the pregnancy, the baby comes early, and they maybe didn't have that plan in place. Any advice that you'd give them for how to create that plan on short notice?
Ooh, that's a good one. My focus is like, how can we as therapists think about everything first? So
And
that
not
never
have that happen. Yeah.
But the reality is that we are not in control of this thing.
Yes.
Our bodies do pregnancy however they do them, and we're just kind of along for the ride in very many ways. So if like the worst case scenario happened where a therapist had to be, some kind of emergency situation, and they had to be out of their office for the rest of their pregnancy and leave. Wow. I would say one thing is the therapist clients are probably not, assuming that the therapist gets the treatment that they need, and the clients are probably not going to be totally left in the dust. If there's an emergency situation, maybe the therapist will need to be addressing it in the immediate time, but then usually things calm down enough so that the therapist can reach out, maybe with a mass email or something, and say, hey guys, this is what happened, and here's the plan, or here's 3 referral sources that anyone can call, or something like that. It's still the therapist's responsibility if they can make that happen. If the absolute worst, I don't know, John, like if the absolute worst case scenario happened, man, there's definitely a power differential, right, in the therapist-client relationship, and we have to acknowledge that, but also we're human too. And, there are things that come up that we will just not be in control of. So find a new therapist and make it very clear to that new therapist that you want to process all of the feelings you might be feeling about what just happened.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, and I think especially if you're dealing with a therapist or social worker that they're in a group practice, you can typically reach out to office administrator or practice manager, clinical director or something like that, and ideally, I'm thinking as a business owner, I'm thinking like I would be reaching out to those clients if that were to have happened. So I would, especially if you're working with somebody who's in a group practice, there's somebody to get in touch with, and then they will come up with a plan of, okay, would you like to work with somebody else in our practice? We can refer you out, or things like that.
Absolutely. And what else is coming to mind is that I'm a solo practitioner, so I don't have that sort of natural built-in support. But what I should have is a professional will. And so hopefully your therapist will be more responsible than me and will already have their professional will completed. So Yes, in most situations with people being responsible, there are people that are going to be able to reach out to you. Another thing that if you're a therapist and you do, if you encounter an emergency, is reach out to a colleague,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, that can step in. Um,
Well, and, you threw yourself under the bus and allowed me to. You opened the door for me to go there with the topic of a professional will. So, for any listeners that aren't aware of what that is, yeah, it's in the event that the therapist dies unexpectedly or is incapacitated, in a vegetative state or things like that, or even current situation of like your therapist just so happened to travel to China and now they're quarantined, in China and unable to get back. Yeah, so it covers those kind of contingencies for what will happen to the client, what will happen to the client file, things like that. So, do you typically recommend for the therapists that you work with and consult with that they complete one of those and kind of have that ready?
yeah, I think everyone needs there are many things that therapists need to do to make sure their practice is in tip-top shape, and that's really an important one. In the book, I talk about having a backup plan and give therapists steps to take to, if you go into labor early or things like that. But the absolute, number one backup plan that all therapists should have is a professional well.
And off of my experience, it's something we've had to look at in the wake of COVID-19. Is I know Simple Practice and Ben Caldwell, I believe it is their director of continuing education. He has a really good training for professional will, and you actually get a template at the end of the training. So I would definitely recommend people check that out. Yeah, that like you said, that idea of having the backup plan. Are there other things that you would advise clients in preparing for the therapist being out?
Yeah. And I think I've said these, before in this conversation, but I think it's so important to just drill it in that any feelings that come up for you about this event that is happening, any feelings you have about your therapist or the pregnancy or the baby or their upcoming leave or anything, all of those feelings are valid. So if you as the client can do the work to acknowledge and validate your own feelings, that's awesome, number one. If you can find a way to be honest about your feelings to your therapist, also awesome,
Yeah,
really. And, this might feel like a crisis in your treatment, but, you can use any crisis for growth.
sure. Yeah, I think that's so well said. Yeah. I think so often people shy away from any of those difficult conversations, and yeah, being able to use that for okay, this can create growth. This can have positive points to it. It doesn't have to only be a negative. Not that it is a negative at all. It's just something for the client and the counselor to work through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it can either deepen your therapeutic alliance or it can deepen your own work or it can, give you some more information about, right, the kind of work you want to be doing. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for being able to talk about this. I know it's not, at least in my experience, I've not come across a lot of clinicians that are working in that space and helping other clinicians prepare for it. So I'm sorry that you you didn't have the book for yourself when you were going through it, but I'm glad that you've seen the need and filled the gap. So that's awesome.
I wrote the book that I needed, John.
There you go. And so where can people find you? Where can people find the book? Yeah.
Sure. So the book is called The Therapist's Guide to Being Pregnant, a planner, timeline, and guide for therapist parents to be. You can find the book, if you're curious about it, at therapistguidetobeingpregnant.com. Barnes & Noble is selling it. Amazon is selling it. You can find me at karabolling.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Kara Bolling, LCSWC.
Okay. And the Bolling is Bolling, and Kara is with a K, correct? That's Kara.
That's right.
All right. And I'll have all that in the show notes and links to everything for listeners. So, Kara, before you go, any other thing you would want, if you were speaking to every clinician that was going to be experiencing parental leave, or any client, any other thing that you'd want to share with them?
I think we can all be just a little bit better, whatever that means, when we can acknowledge our own humanity and take really good care of ourselves and each other.
Nice. Again, well said. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, and good luck with your practice and the work that you're doing. Any other projects you got coming up in 2020 or beyond? I know a lot of people are kind of on hold right now.
We are on hold. We're feeling all the feelings in this household. We are being present for our clients, and that's
That's
good.
Enough. Yep.
That's enough.
That is plenty. Well, yeah. Well, I look forward to keeping an ear out for your work and staying in touch with you. So thanks for being on the show.
John, thank you so much.
Yeah, take care.
All right, you too.
Well, there you have it, OTC listeners. Thank you so much to Kara for being on and being willing to discuss that with me. So again, just to recap for listeners, it's important to be able to communicate with your therapist leading up to them being out, and some things that you should have as a backup. Recapping any techniques that they've taught you, things that you've worked on, having a backup plan of another therapist to reach out to, or coverage. That for some that might be crisis intervention phone numbers, or suicide prevention hotline, or things like that. And being able to talk about that, it can strengthen the therapeutic relationship to talk about, I'm really nervous about you being out, and what am I going to do, and needing to prepare for that. It doesn't have to be a negative. I understand that it can cause stress, but again, it's something that you should address head on, and feel equipped and feel prepared for. So if you're interested in checking out Kara, you can find her at karabolling.com. So that's KaraBolling.com. So definitely check out the work that she's doing. She's doing so much in the Maryland area, and just in the space of counselors preparing to be out on paternity or maternity leave, for her work with somatic therapy, and just so many things. So definitely check out what she's doing. I will catch you all next episode. In next episode, it will be OTC episode 60, so the big 60. And I'll be sharing a talk that I got to have. I got to sit down with Dr. Sue Stewart-Smith from across the pond. She is the author of The Well-Gardened Mind. So talking about just the benefit of nature and horticultural therapy, and everything connected to that, and her books and the work that she's doing in England. So check it out.